Can you believe it? We are halfway through the year, and saying that doesn't make me feel good. I'm filming this on June 22, and looking at the date and saying it's halfway through the year doesn't sit right with me. But anyway, we have a new setup. I'm trying to be comfortable. We have a couple of books right beside me, and hopefully this video doesn't take a whole hour again. Today we are talking about my reading highlights so far, the ones that I wanted to quickly share with you, some of my favorite books, but also some fun little questions just to make this a little bit more interesting. And to avoid making this a whole hour, let's get right to it. So I will be splitting this video into two parts. First, we're gonna answer some fun little interesting questions, which I have right here. What is my favorite reread of the year so far? What book has aged well? What book hasn't aged well? What surprised me and exceeded my expectations? And what disappointed me and didn't meet my expectations? So that's the first part, just some fun little highlights. And then probably the reason why you clicked on this video, which is my favorite books of 2025. And as you guys can see, I have a laptop here because there are some quotes from some of these books that I just wanted to... Did you guys hear, you know? They're amazing books and I love them and I wanted to share it with you why I love them. So let's get right to it. Our first one is what is my favorite reread of 2025 so far? We have A Minor Chorus by Mr. Billy Ray Belcourt, and this man is what became one of my all-time favorite writers after first reading his book last year with Coexistence, his latest book, which is a short story collection. And I read his other books immediately after. I read A Minor Chorus, History of My Brief Body, and then I believe NDN Coping Mechanisms, which is a poetry collection. And I loved all of them, but Coexistence remained my favorite for a very long time. And then I got into a reading slump around last week. I was reading A Great Black Hope by Rob Franklin, and it just wasn't resonating so far. And I was looking for a book that can just pick me up a little bit more. And I remembered how much I love Billy Ray Belcourt's writing. The thing with Billy Ray Belcourt is he writes in every form. He has a short story collection, he has a novel, he has a memoir, he has a poetry collection, if I've mentioned it already. He is a master at writing, and what makes him stand out to me as a writer is every single word that he chooses to put down, to put into paper, feels like it's enveloped by this sense of tenderness. The same way how a muscle, when you're sore or you're tired, feels sensitive to the touch, so you have to be careful, you have to pay attention. And that's how it feels to be able to read his books. It feels like every single word that you're reading requires so much care because the author put so much care in his writing, and he's writing not only for himself, and you realize that even in his novel. And A Minor Chorus is about a PhD student who is taking a pause from his dissertation to write a novel. What novel he doesn't quite know yet, but he wanted to get to know his community of indigenous people, Cree people, and understand their stories, not to write their story, but to speak from their voice, to find that first person plural, which I found very fascinating of a terminology for Billy Ray Belcourt to use. And you see that. You see that in his writing. You see that he pays so much attention to what he puts down into paper, and it blows my mind every time. The amount of times I had to just step back from the book just to absorb what I've already read before, but I'm rereading now. It is absolutely stunning, and I just pick up any Billy Ray Belcourt book that you can find, and I am sure you will be blown away. And I have a passage from the book, from A Minor Chorus, that I absolutely love, that I wanted to share with you guys. And it says here, I had been overtaken by new ambitions, a more consuming kind of hunger. A hunger for another way of being in the world. I couldn't unsee everything my gut told me I was missing out on. It was still summer nonetheless, and there was still the greenery, which was so lush and overwhelming it was something of an argument for optimism. A reminder that I had to be alert to the beauty in excess, the beauty in things that quietly endure despite their unbeautiful contexts. If I admired my own abundances, my own little rebellions against subjugation, I reasoned, I could learn to be alive as possible. It seemed silly I hadn't come to this conclusion sooner. My God, I really do love his writing. And there's another one that I just saw now. What were two brown boys dancing in the forests of northern Alberta, but glistening accidents, lowercase letters scribbled down for no one to see, that somehow against all odds came to life? What was I if not a disobedient blur? Amazing. Let's move on. Next, we have What Book Has Aged Well? And we have On the Calculation of Volume, Part 2 by Salvage Baye. If you guys follow my Instagram, you know that I love book one of this series. I have so much respect for Salvage Baye on the way they are so confident in the restraint of identifying how much to say and how much not to say in what is supposed to be a 7-part series about a woman that is stuck on the same day. Because your guess is as good as mine. I don't know how they're gonna stretch it out for that long. But book one by itself was phenomenal. And I read book two immediately after, and at one point I was scared that it was gonna start feeling repetitive up until the ending, which made me excited for book three, but still, it made me wonder how long it was gonna keep its interesting premise up for. And then I saw a review on TikTok, which if I cannot for the life of me remember where I saw it, but that creator was talking about how the first book looks at getting stuck on the same day from a passive lens, while book two is on an active lens, and it really gave me a new perspective on how to approach this book. And usually reviews don't do much for me because my reading experience is still mine, and you cannot really change how I felt. But in this case, it gave me a new appreciation for this one, and I plan to reread it before I get to book three, which I think should be coming out sometime this year. Next, we have What Book Hasn't Aged Well, and I don't have a physical copy of this, and I don't really have much more to say about it because I've talked about it before. Great Big Beautiful Life by Emily Henry. I just didn't care. I think that's the best way I can put it. I was reading it during my runs as an audiobook, and it was fun. It was interesting. It was entertaining, at least for the duration of my run. But the more I sit with it and look back at my reading experience, I don't really remember much about it. There's so much that I'm just like, huh, it's not really that interesting. It just felt like a derivative of a lot of better books that I've already read, both a rom-com book and Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, that I just think the book could have been trimmed down by a lot and just reframe the story to become more interesting and more cohesive. It probably goes down from a 3 stars to a 2.5 for me at this point. The next one we have, actually, let's start with a more negative one and then let's end with a positive one. What book disappointed me and didn't meet my expectations? And I have to get it from under. I'll start first with the one that didn't meet my expectations, and I don't really have much to say about it, which is Madonna and the Fur Coat by Sabahat Ali. This is a book talk darling. This is actually a book community darling. I see a lot of people really love it. There's a lot of beautiful lines. It's an interesting love story. I bought it on a whim because I needed the book for a flight to Kathmandu, and I finished it on the plane. And when I finished the book, I looked at my friend and I was like, "That's good." And I think that's the only thing I really have to say. I didn't have the time to write a review on this, which I always diligently do, but I was going on a hike and I didn't have the time, and I'm just looking at it now and there's nothing in my heart. I don't have any emotions towards this book. It was good. Not bad, not amazing. And the book that disappointed me. I am sorry, Miss Rachel Cusk, Transit. I read Outline last year. I gave it 4 stars. It was interesting. The length of conversation. I'm not sure if the book was interesting or I was just in Copenhagen in a sunny day and I was just like, "Ooh, it's a vibe. Let's read a book." And it's about meeting people and having conversations. And Rachel Cusk does write conversations quite well, but I don't resonate with her writing. The emotional detachment is something that I have just never have had a long history of not enjoying. But when it's done well, I do love it. I would like to think my favorite book of the year so far writes with a bit more objectivity than emotions, but I still felt something, and that's something I always like to look for when I'm reading a book. Unfortunately, with the 2 books by Rachel Cusk that I've read, I just didn't get it. And Transit all the more, I was kind of just bored and I just wanted it to end, and to end on a good note, for the more positive ones, we have What Books Surprised Me and Exceeded My Expectations. I'll start first with what exceeded my expectations, which is My Friends by Frederick Bachman. I am so when it comes to Frederick Bachman. I love the Beartown series. I haven't read the last book, but I'm pretty sure I would love it. And I didn't care about anxious people. It was fine. Didn't wasn't obsessed. I found it very overdrawn. Frederick Bachman's My Friends, I feel like in any other point in my life, this would just be an okay book, but it became a right place, right time kind of book. It's a story that it's very important in my personal life when I read it. It's a book about friends who go through a lot of things together in love as well as in loss, and the way art shapes their relationships with others and themselves, and how believing in each other can take us to places. And for all of the hangups I have on Frederick Bachman's sentimentality when he writes, which sometimes just make me roll my eyes. I read this as a physical copy and an audiobook. I The story got to me. I have to admit. The writing can sometimes be, oh, beautiful, oh, ooh. But at the end of the day, I really love the story, and I cannot deny that. I give this a good 4 stars, and I was crying on the back of a motorbike when I finished this book. So I feel like that should say everything. And last but not least, we have What Book Surprised Me. We have Tomb of Sand by Jichan Shri. I am so proud of this book. I had no plans to read this year, but I just saw it staring at me back in March after reading almost the whole long list of the International Booker. And I was like, you know what? I've been putting this off for a while. Maybe I should read it. I started it actually a couple years back. I read 200 pages out of 900, and I remembered enjoying it, but life got in the way, and it's a bit of a chonker. But this reads so easily. The chapters are short, there's a rhythm to the language. Daisy Rockwell is a superstar of a translator. And the themes and concept that this book explores, it goes from very rooted on realism, and then it gets a bit more abstract, and it just works. It just works, and it makes it so fascinating and bingeable of a read. And for a bit of context, this is about a elderly woman, an 80-year-old woman, if I'm not mistaken, who is trying to deal with the loss of her husband and the crazy adventure that she goes on with her daughter to be able to process this. And it becomes a story of borders, whether it be cultural, physical land borders, and even gender, that makes for a beautiful, beautiful adventure. So don't let this little chonker um, deter you from reading this book, because it is phenomenal. Phenomenal. But yes, those are the questions, and we are moving right to our favorites of the year, which I'm pretty sure is the reason you guys clicked on this video. If the lighting changed, I took a bit of a break. I got a bookish package. You guys will be waiting for a haul. This is a stunning, stunning book haul. And then it started raining, so in case it becomes a bit darker. Now we're going straight to the favorite books. I will be talking about my 4.5 star reads, 3 4.75 star reads, which will either be 5 or 4.5 once time does its thing. And then last would be my 2 favorite books, my 2 5-star reads of the year so far. Let's get right to it. First, we have Perfection by Vincenzo Latronico. This, I think, is my first book from the International Booker Prize long list that I read, and it was a stunning start to the long list. I devoured this book. It felt like putting up a mirror to society's face and forcing us to see the state that we're in. It is about a couple that is trying to build their life and try to come close to what they consider to be perfection. Because nowadays we get to live a bit more unconventionally. We get to do our little freelance jobs and do other things that generations before us didn't really have the luxury for. We get to go beyond the bounds of society's expectations. But once you look a bit closer and you observe, you start seeing that the cage just changed and you start seeing cracks. Because in the world today, we are now influenced by how interconnected we all are, as well as the highly digital world that we're living in, that we're now just bound by different expectations. And I think Vincenzo Shoneko does a wonderful job in showing that here in Perfection. Next, we have the Book of Disappearance by Ibtisa Mazem. This is I think within the long list, this is the one that made me feel the most. This is a story that asks, what if all Palestinians vanished from their homeland overnight? Which, it is speculative fiction, but if you look around the world today, it's pretty much a political reality. That despite in this novel, they just randomly disappear one random day, reality is a much, much harsher place, because there is violence in the real world that we're seeing, which, again, reality can be much worse than fiction. And this book allows us to see what happens and how the world reacts, which includes the settler nation if this instance does happen. And it's not merely just that exploration, because in this novel we also get to see a grandson reminiscing his grandmother's seeming love letters to Jaffa, the city that they used to call home, but is now transformed as something that is hard to recognize, but they still try to believe in, because it is home for them. It is still the place that their ancestors were living in. And both that beauty and the terror of the disappearance coexisting in this novel is absolutely beautiful. And I want to read you guys a quote from this book that I absolutely loved, which is, "I sit down and miss you, but today for the first time I smiled when I was missing you, only because I remembered why I loved you more than anyone else. Do you know why? Because you loved life and never lost hope. You learned to love Jaffa even when it was cruel, and you taught me that love. You used to say that Jaffans are sea people and merchants. They acclimate no matter where they go or stay, are like shore people. You were alone in Jaffa, but you loved it like you loved a man, madly. You wouldn't stop loving no matter what. I sit in the small courtyard in your house. I've repaired it and painted it. I didn't get a permit from the municipality. We'll see how they react. I watered your jasmines. Their scent is all around. Like you, jasmines love the night. The moon is so full and big tonight, it's about to take up the whole sky. I don't know why I feel so happy today. As if I've rediscovered Jaffa, or learned to love it again. I walk and see its beauty." Beautiful, beautiful novel. Not only is it important, but it's also so haunting and beautiful, and I guess ghostly is the word that I can think of right now. How such a quiet novel permeates this kind of atmosphere while you're reading the book of what was and what could be, but also what is happening today, and having all of those coexist. Next, we have On the Calculation of Volume Part 1 by Slovej Baya. This is a book that I really, really loved when I first read it. It is exactly what I love to experience in a book. It felt meditative. There is repetition here based on its plot about a woman being stuck on the same day, November 18th, but the repetition never feels repetitive. It felt controlled and clear, and the repetition seemed to have rhythm. It slows you down in a way that allows you to pay attention and really think, what would you do if suddenly you have all the time in the world, but not in the way that you think, not in the way that time progresses, but you have the same time over and over again? How will that impact your relationships with love, with life, and how you observe everyone and everything around you? And it's the amount it explores and the way it divulges information but also keeps it. There's so much confidence in that restraint that I really respect with Solvage Baya, and the reason why I absolutely love this book. And I know some people found it boring, but to me I found it very, again, meditative is the word that I could best describe this book, and the reason why I considered it one of my favorites of the year so far. Entry number 157. It is easy to get the days to pass. They fly by. I want, but it is a light wanting. I yearn, but it is an easy yearning. It is a day containing more and more details. It is becoming more and more predictable. I feel at home. I feel at home in more and more details. I know how the day goes. I know its sounds and the intervals between the sounds. I know the shifts in the light and the intensity of the rain. I see the light opening up the room where the sun breaks through. There's a blackbird's zigzagging flight call, and the muffled drone of a car 2 streets away, and later the same sound in a different order. Light, car, bird. Later again, wind and trees, plant pot and wind, brief pause, car. And later still, wind, plant pot, long pause, car. And before I know it, the day is over. There is a rhythm that I really love and appreciate about this book. Next, we have a fun one. We have Rejection by Tony Tolatimute. I have been looking for this for like 6 to 8 months. And I mentioned this, I think, in my May reading wrap up. So I won't really talk too much about it, but this was a whole lot of fun. If perfection puts a mirror up to society's face, this one slaps you in the face. Probably with the same mirror, because this takes the concept of rejection in today's highly connected world and how it leaves us a lot more isolated and a lot more prone to rejection and insecurities and a lot of concerns, because the world is not just your oyster, the world is all around you, online, all at the same time, and there becomes more and more opportunity for such isolation, for such rejection, and you see how people can react so violently and grotesquely. I'm usually not a short story collection fan, but I thoroughly enjoyed this. I felt that this was even all throughout. Of course, I would have my favorite short stories, but generally the quality is consistent. And the last short story, I love a meta moment. So great one. Do check the trigger warnings. It, it gets a bit out there, but I think to me it works. Donita Timute. I'm a fan. So those are our 4.5 reads. Those are very strong 4.5 reads. I'm pretty sure I have other 4.5 star reads, but these are like the strong ones. These are no-brainer 4.5 star books. So now we're down to my top 5 favorite books of 2025 so far, and this now will be in a more rough order, which of course last one will be my first. I'll start with the fifth one. And again, my 4.75 star books are ones that I'm waiting for time to do its thing, and I want to see whether it goes up to a 4.70 to a 5 star, or it goes down to a 4.5. I generally don't like to keep them at a 4.75 as much as I can. So I'll probably have a better read on their final rating by the end of the year, but for now, we'll keep them at 4.75. We'll start first with A Language of Limbs by Dylan Hardcastle, which I read just this month, and it was a bit more of a last minute read because someone recommended this to me when I was talking about limbs as a cover for queer books, and they told me to read this, and they gave me a wonderful recommendation, because this is a debut novel, but what an excellent debut novel. It is about a queer life that is split into two limbs when you're confronted with the decision of pursuing or leaning into your queer life or suppressing it to live a more heteronormative, or at least a life that conforms by what society expects of you, even if it's not what you want. And that becomes the two limbs that this story takes. You have limb one and limb two, and both have their own stories, have their own lives. And you get to see a queer life in two different forms. In the same way that you have limb one and limb two, they're basically two stories that mirror each other in the same body. And I think that's a beautiful tool that Dylan Hardcastle used in writing this novel. But the thing that I really loved about this novel is the prose itself is tender and intimate and is filled with so much longing. The way limbs in this novel, the way their body moves, holds so much memory, desire, emotion, and the way writing and physicality go hand in hand makes the reading experience feel so physical. And it gets to reflect on queer lives through the use of this language, through the use of this plot points and narratives of queer lives that are not just that of sorrow, but also that of joy, and how both coexist. Next, we have another 4.75 star read, Martyr by Kaveh Akbar. And this is a book that I entered, that I read with high expectations. I tried to lower my expectations, but everyone was just saying, Ashe, you will love it. It's a poet turned novelist. Guys, I love my poets turned novelists. And usually high expectations don't fare well for me, but this book delivered. This is about a recovering addict Iranian American poet that is trying to make sense of death. Not death in the lens of despair, but death in the lens of wanting to make it matter, like a martyr. And what I love about this book is not just its content, but the way the form takes, the perspectives, the time shifts, as well as the POVs that we get in this novel, because it tackles a lot of things. This book is filled with so much themes that at one point I was concerned whenever I hear people talk about it that, oh, it tackles this, addiction, family, intergenerational trauma, addiction, queerness, etc., that at one point I was concerned, how will the author be able to land such an undertaking? I would like to apologize to Kaveh Akbar for questioning you, because this masterclass, everything just flows so perfectly that the themes don't work by themselves. They are so interconnected that it feels stupid of me to even think that each would be tackled separately. And the way Cafe Akbar is able to make sure everything works seamlessly with each other is honestly very impressive. And that, combined with beautiful prose, stunning. And there's a passage in this book that I absolutely adore, and I'll just bleep out a name here because it might be spoilery. What I want to say is that I was happy. Not always, not even mostly, but I did know real, deep joy. Maybe everyone gets a certain amount to use up over a lifetime, and I just used my lifetime's allocation especially quickly. But I don't think it was a tragedy, my life. Tragedies are relentless. Nobody could ask for more than what I've had. That passage gets to me every time, especially that last line. Nobody could ask for more than what I've had, and it reminds me of this question, of this statement that I've been turning over in my head since December of 2024, which is, I look at my life and it's more than I could have ever asked for, and I hope I never ask for more. Which is all to say that I have so many things and dreams that I want to achieve, but what I have now is more than enough, and everything else becomes a bonus. And I hope that I get to live this dreaming side by side with the gratitude for the life that I have that I have now. And this passage just captures it beautifully. Next is the most surprising inclusion in this list, of course, is The Emperor of Gladness by Ocean Vuong. This might either be a non-surprise or a surprise to you guys because it's at 4.75. But Ocean Vuong, if you guys have been following me, even for just a single day, you would know that Ocean Vuong is my favorite author of all time. On Earth We Feel Gorgeous, Night Sky with X Wounds, and Time is a Mother. Listened to so many of his interviews and just read as much of his works as I can. And this man captures what I generally hold true to my life and just philosophies that I believe in, which is on the concept of being and being present, and just there's no author that I've discovered that captures it as much as he does. So I already knew that I would love this. And I do love this because Emperor of Gladness is a story. If I were to use Ocean's own words, it's a story that tries to tell. It's a book that tries to tell a story of kindness without hope, which is, I couldn't have put it more beautifully myself, because it is a story that doesn't have happy endings. It doesn't have bad endings. It's about a story that just keeps going on. It's about lives that don't always get redemption, that don't always get happy endings, but also don't always end in tragedies. Because some lives are worth it just by simply being. That existence in and of itself, and deciding to keep going and going on and being okay, is more than enough. And that's something that Ocean Vuong has long given me the words for. And something that I always look back to and try to remember deep within myself whenever I get a bit more anxious and stressed. And this is a beautiful novel that captures that. And on a more personal note, I read this in a very, one of the worst days of my year. And I personally messaged Ocean to say thank you, because this felt like a warm hug that I needed during what was a very difficult time in my life. And it's a beautiful novel, and I'm not surprised for how much I love this book. And before I move on, I will also read a quote specifically from this book that I love and adore. Quote, "He would come closest to all that he ever wanted to be. A consciousness sitting under a light bulb, reading. His days away, warm and alone and yet somehow still somebody's son." Another one is, "I'm scared, Ma, of what's coming, of the future. It just seems so big." Mom responds, "It's only because you're young. Eventually it gets smaller. But don't be afraid of life, son. Life is good when we do good things for each other." I got goosebumps. And one last. And this again is a passage that gave me the words for an emotion or a feeling that I like to, that I never had before, which is, why would you listen to sad songs when you're already sad? I guess it gives the feeling a place to stand in, like a little bus stop. So now whenever I look or consume, read, watch, whatever, any form of media that matches how I'm feeling, whether I'm happy, I'm sad, I'm anxious, I think of it as a little bus stop for my feelings and my emotions, which, again, the best literature always leaves you with something. And The Emperor of Gladness, just as I'm talking about this, it's already going up to a 5-star, but we'll leave it to the end of the year. Now we're down to my two easy 5-star reads. These are 5-star reads that I didn't even have to think twice. They were like, boop. And I don't even know if I have the words to describe these books, so if I'm a bit more incoherent for these ones, I apologize. First, we have Monstrilio by Gerardo Samana Cordova. Guys, this is a debut novel. That is. Can't believe it. I don't believe it. I'm already speechless. This is a novel that caught me off guard. I finished the book that I'll be talking about after this right before reading this book. So I was on a reader's high. I haven't even fully digested the other book, and I was like, okay, I'm happy with even the 4-star read next, but this book, I devoured it. I loved it so much, and it stands side by side with my other 5-star read in terms of the way they talk about grief, because this one talks about it in all of its grotesque and irrational forms. Because in this novel, we have a mom whose son dies, and she cuts off a part of her son's lung and takes care of it, nurtures it until it takes the form of something that resembles grief in human/monster form. So it is outlandish and starts out weird, then it continues on being weird, but it what is a strange novel, a literary horror novel, becomes a profound exploration of grief in all of its messiest forms and all of its uncategorizable, undescribable, and just isolating forms. Because you get to see these characters that 4 different perspectives this book's take. And it asks, what are we willing to become when we lose the one that we love the most? And the answer isn't always pretty, and it's hard to always keep it palatable. And you'll see it doesn't. It's not palatable. It becomes obsessive. It becomes desperate, and it becomes something that looks ugly but is born out of so much love, which I think can describe grief as an emotion itself as well. But yes, Monstrilio is a stunning book. It is, I would categorize it as a literary horror in the way that horror in the best kinds of movies are ones that explores grief and the darkness that comes out of it. And it's a literary horror that is filled with so much tenderness that it starts to feel like it's betraying the genre for how much love and care it also holds side by side with its quote unquote horrors, because it's not scary. It's more depressing that it is scary, but absolutely stunning, and I love this book, and I'm excited to reread this for years to come. And now we're down to the last book. I don't know. I still have not had the words for this book, and I want to be able to talk about this with a lot more care. But this one is Things in Nature Merely Grow by Yiyun Lee. And my favorite book of the year so far is a nonfiction book. That is wild. This book is a no-brainer for me. This book I wanted to savor and slow down with, but my body just couldn't. I wanted to inhale it. I wanted to really absorb everything that Yiyun Lee is writing, all of the difficulty and all of the strength she was able to muster to write this book, but also just it is such a special book that I'm sure people who have known grief would appreciate that despite the very specific circumstances here, there's a lot of truths, and I think that is what Yiyun Lee was attempting to do in writing a memoir that approaches it from a more objective perspective, approaching loss through facts and objectivity, which is not usually. I got my first booktuber newbie pain. I was talking about things in Nature Merely Grow, and I realized my phone died halfway through talking. And this is a very difficult book to talk about. It's a very difficult book to talk about, and I'm not gonna start from scratch. So I'm gonna start from the middle, and I apologize. Birthing pains. But as I was saying, guys, my momentum. I was feeling it as I was talking about this book earlier. But as I was saying earlier, that when it comes to books, I like writing in prose that leans into their vulnerability and their emotions. And this is not it. This is an emotionally detached book. It observes and is objective and looks at facts, and really, even when you look at the writing, it's very precise, and you know that Yun Lee paid attention into what words she wants to use to describe her experience and to talk about her children. And for some reason, it worked. And as someone who has read so many books about grief and loss and sorrow, this is easily one of the best things I've ever read in the topic. And I remember at the start of the year when I was going through my own experience with grief, an experience that I haven't experienced in a very long time, the first thing I did, and this sounds very stupid now that I am reflecting back on it, the first thing I did was to go through my books and look for something that will allow me to just process my emotion, how lost I was feeling. And the funny thing is, and I think I should have known this coming into it, is that no book is going to solve it for you. No book is going to fix it to you. And there's a passage in this book that I will share to you in a bit that Yunli captures perfectly. But what they do is they sit with you. Because these works of grief, whether they be movies, shows, or books, are works of people who processed it themselves. It's what they needed. And if someone picks up something from it, then it's great, but it's not what it's made for. At least that's what I think. And being able to realize that these works are something to sit with really gave me a renewed way of approaching grief, of sitting with the emotion, a very difficult emotion. And the passages I was talking about, then, my God, I had to stop reading for a bit when I saw this. So this is from the book. Sometimes people ask me where I am in the grieving process, and I wonder whether they understand anything at all about losing someone. How lonely the dead would feel if the living were to stand up from death's shadow, clap their hands, dust their pants, and say to themselves into the world, I am done with my grieving. From this point on, it's life as usual, business as usual. I don't want an endpoint to my sorrow. The death of a child is not a heat wave or a snowstorm, nor an obstacle race to rush through and win, nor an acute or chronic illness to recover from. Because what is grief but a word, a shortcut, a simplification of something much larger than the word? And I think that's such a beautiful, beautiful way of putting it. And you will see it not only from things in nature really grow, but you'll see it in I am having a realization as I'm talking to you right now, which is maybe a good thing that the previous video got cut off, that every single book in my top 5 right now is a book that deals with grief. Things in Nature Merely Grow, Monstrilio, The Emperor of Gladness, Martyr by Café Akbar, and The Language of Limbs by Dylan Hardcastle. These are books that are dripping with sorrow and grief, and in different levels, but grief nonetheless. And I think what I was sharing about that realization of having a bus stop, using Emperor of Gladness terminology, to sit with and just have as company is something of beautiful realization to have. And these same books also talk about how grief in itself is a way of continuing to love someone. By living, you're able to continue living the rest of your lives loving this someone, even if you lost them already. And I think that's such a beautiful way of looking at life and going through grief. And I am grateful for these books for giving me the words to really process and understand such a complex and difficult emotion. Whew. That ended on a note. It didn't end that seriously before my phone died, but I guess there was a reason for it. But yes, those are my favorite books of the year so far. And I'm curious, please let me know what have been your reading highlights this year? And if you want to answer, I'd love to hear your favorite reread. What book aged well, didn't age well, didn't meet your expectations, and exceeded your expectations? Those are always fun little questions to ask. And you never know, maybe I'll steal a book recommendation from you. And if you enjoyed this video, I hope you stick around. And I will see you back at our usual spot.